Hello, hello, and welcome to our show, Tea Talk, Real Talk, Conversations Over Tea, where we bring guests on our shows to talk about issues and topics that matter. Today I have this great lady. She is a storyteller, historian, and her name is Linda Caldwell Elps. She's going to tell us about herself, and here we are. So Linda.
Well, thank you for having me, Sharon. Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming.
And telling the stories of African Americans in general, but African American women in particular, is something that I love to do.
Yes.
Because as Alice Walker once said, we have been the last to enter, well, she was talking about writing, enter
Right.
into the canon. And our stories are often marginalized. So I'm glad that you invited me, and we're very happy to be here.
Yes, I mean, after I heard you at NJ Pact, one of my girlfriends actually lives in Newark, and she said, you got to come to this event, it's going to be really great.
Oh.
And you know, I am not from Newark, but I do network there a lot. I think it's a wonderful place. So when I heard your story, you know, about all the different people, black people in Newark, the history, it was so amazing. So I had to bring you on the show so you can tell us a little bit more about it, how you got started. Just tell us your journey.
Okay. Newark at the turn of the 20th century had very few African Americans living there. But Newark was New Jersey, and probably still is New Jersey's #1 city. And it was lively, filled with opportunity, employment opportunity, social opportunity. And for many people in the South, it became known as the Promised Land.
Right.
It was the place to go if you wanted to improve yourself, if you were
Right.
looking for a better life. And women, of course, were included in this group of people who were yearning
Right.
for something better. They were not, opportunity in the South was limited. They were farmers,
Right.
or they were domestics being paid an extraordinarily low wage.
Right.
And they knew that there had to be something better in life. So they journeyed not only to Newark, but to other large cities in New Jersey. But Newark had the fastest growing African American population. It was the state's, and still is the state's, largest city.
Yes.
And so I, for many years, was the president of the New Jersey Historical Society.
Right.
And we did an exhibit commemorating the 40th anniversary of the Newark Rebellion. It was based on oral histories. So many of the stories that you heard
Right.
at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center were oral histories that were done in preparation for that exhibit. All right? Why did people come to Newark? What did they find when they arrived? And how did it turned out not to be quite the promised land that people were looking for?
Right, yeah. It's amazing because, I mean, a lot of the urban communities, you know, it's really tough. And I think, you know, people are afraid to even go there.
That's true.
But it has changed so drastically. So much is going on in Newark now.
That's true.
You know, the NJ Pack and all these other businesses. I know a lot of entrepreneurs that have businesses there. Matter of fact, moving from other places there. But, you know, so many people are still afraid of it because of the crime. You know, so how do you say to people, you have to, like, get over it, basically?
You have to get over
it. That's really it.
You have to
it's
get
a
over
really
it.
wonderful place.
And I think people are always surprised when they do come. The culture is magnificent. We have the Performing Arts Center, of course. Everyone knows that, and they know the Newark Museum.
Right.
They may know Prudential Center.
Yes.
But they're unaware of the many smaller art galleries.
Yes.
And music venues that are available. It's really, if you are looking for a thriving place
Right.
to live, Newark is that place.
Yes, yeah, and
Newark
I
it's
agree.
a university town.
Right, it is.
It's got NJIT, it's got Rutgers Newark,
Yes.
it's got Seton Hall,
Yes.
it's got Essex County College. They're all in the center of downtown, and I believe there are probably 30 to 40,000 students who are there every day, and students always make a
Right.
place lively.
They do, they do, because I actually was at the Rutgers Business School. I went there for 10 months, and so that's why I know so much about it, because
That's
I'm always
right.
there for
That's
that.
right.
But then so many other organizations that do help, you know, not just African Americans, but
right.
minorities
That's
and
right.
women.
Yeah, they're
and
there.
So yeah, there's so many companies there that
They're there.
are really working to make it a better place, and so.
And it's always, probably aside from a few years around the rebellion, it's always been seen as a place of opportunity for those who were disenfranchised elsewhere.
Right.
And it was that way for the women that I discussed.
Right.
I have a cousin, and I asked her, why did you make the journey from North Carolina to Newark?
Right.
And she said, I was making $2 a week. This was in the late 1950s, doing domestic work.
Oh my gosh.
And I knew that I could not support my 3 children on that kind of
Right.
salary. So she took the chance and came to Newark and immediately made $8 a
Right,
week, which was a
right.
big improvement. And soon after that was able to secure a job at the post office where she
Nice.
worked until her retirement. So it really
Nice.
was the land of opportunity
of course.
for her as it was for so many.
Right. And that's the thing. People have to make the opportunity
They do.
sometimes, you know, and not be afraid. Because, you know, you have to kind of step out and go out on faith and just kind of try to make things happen for yourself too.
What I found with the women that I interviewed was, first of all, a strong faith
Right.
and a determination that they would not accept failure.
Right.
And even when something went wrong, they said, well, this is not going to work. Let's just retrench
Right.
and find something else that will.
Exactly.
So they had a very tenacious kind of spirit,
Right.
a determination to make things better for themselves and for their families.
Right.
And that's what they did. Now, I'm not talking about people who became radio or television
Right, of
personalities
course.
or even became teachers, although some of them did. Many of them came up here to do the same kind of work that they did
Right.
in the South. But the difference was, one, they were making a decent wage.
Exactly.
And 2, they were allowed entry into, eventually allowed entry
Right.
into restaurants and
Right.
movie theaters. And there were freedoms, there were liberties open to them in Newark that they did not have in the South.
Right.
And that made a world of difference. But number 1, there was educational opportunity for their children.
Right.
And that was foremost on the minds of people who had families, the reason why they came to Newark. They wanted their children to receive an education.
Right.
And in many places where they came from, 3rd, 4th grade was all you
Right.
could
Wow. Yes.
could do.
Right.
But you could go to high school
Yes.
in
Yes.
Newark. You know,
Yeah.
there were many things that you could do. So the school system was a big draw. And
Right.
that freedom that you, or at least the perceived freedom that the world was open to you.
Okay.
And you could do whatever you chose to do, selected to do,
Right.
was the reason why many of them came.
Right. Now, did she have family up here already? Were you know, who was around at the time?
For me, my mother moved to Newark in 1921. She
Okay.
was 3 years old.
Wow.
She came with her entire family.
Wow.
Came at the same time.
Okay.
They quickly moved to Elizabeth, but they did settle in Newark first. One of the women that is very much alive, and actually I spoke to today, Mrs. Blair, said she graduated from high school, and the next day she was on a train
Wow.
coming to Newark.
Nice.
Because there was nothing for her in Ridge Square, North Carolina.
Right.
And she did factory work and started selling aprons
Wow.
for the women who worked in the factory from the trunk of her car. She was a
Nice.
seamstress.
Wow. Awesome.
So she started selling, they all wore aprons.
Entrepreneur,
She
there you
started
go.
selling aprons from the trunk of her car, which morphed into dresses.
Nice.
She eventually opened 2 clothing
Wow.
stores, 2 clothing shops, and retired from doing that.
Okay.
So that's the kind of success that you could have if you
Right.
had a talent and you were industrious.
Right, exactly.
Those are things that you could do.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah, so what made you decide to really get into this whole, you know, telling the history of, especially women, and in Newark? Tell us the
Well,
past. Like, what did you
I
do
love
before?
listening to stories.
Okay.
And I've always, in some ways, been an old soul.
Okay.
Even when I was younger, I would enjoy listening
Okay.
to my mother and their friends. Sometimes, you know, I found that if you were quiet, no one realized you were there, and they
Right,
would say
that's
anything.
true.
And I would just be as still and as quiet as I could possibly be.
You just take it all in.
And take it all in. I always enjoyed doing that.
Nice.
And as I got older, I realized the value of those stories.
Right.
I was an American Studies major in college and worked in higher education for a long time. And I would go to various academic conferences and I would never hear the stories of African American women. And that was really my motivation. I said, someone's got to start, someone has to do this, to tell our story. The country in many ways was built upon the sweat of African American women. Both in the cotton fields of the South, in the factories in the North, in the homes of the North. We were the nannies, we were the cooks, we were the people who scrubbed the floors.
What did we not do?
Well, we did everything. We did everything. And our story needs to be told. So I consider that part of my mission, part of the reason why I'm here. And in many ways, I had a wonderful mother who worked a full-time job and 2 part-time jobs so that I could go to college. So she's been gone for a long time, but part of it is a tribute to her and many of the women like her who worked hard so that their daughters and their sons could live a different life.
Yeah, my mother was a nurse and she worked maybe 3 jobs
to
put us, she didn't want to put us in public schools.
Education.
So, she put us in church schools. You know, my brother went all the way through college. And so, you know, because they want to better their children.
And as you are an adult now, and you understand how hard it is to work, you can appreciate that sacrifice even more. You know, you might have known it then. I knew then that my mother was sacrificing for me, but to what extent I didn't realize until I was in the position of having to provide for myself and realize just how much she did. And I've heard many women, you know, my age say the same thing. You know, how did they do it? They were miracle women.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I try and put their stories down on paper, but also whenever possible, tell the story to everyone and anyone that I meet.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, how long have you been doing that?
Probably a little bit all of my life, but all of my adult life. But more specifically, I retired 5 years ago, and that's been my retirement job. I started.
And it's a fun job.
It's a fun job. It's a fun job. It's research that I enjoy doing, and I've never been at a loss for words, so I enjoy talking about it. And so it's been almost a full-time job for me for the past 5 years.
Now, are you looking for anyone to help you out in terms of research? Do you have interns? You know, how are you planning to really push this off and expand?
Well, that's a good question because, well, every time I speak someplace, I get other offers. You know, I met you in Newark, and here I am, and probably I've had 3 or 4 other invitations from that one event. And thus far, I've been able to manage, but everyone keeps pressuring me to do that book, and I certainly have enough. I've done a dissertation on this, so I certainly have enough for a book. And that means prioritizing my time. And you're right, getting some support, some help.
Because it's great work. I mean, to me, it's phenomenal. You know, I love to hear stories about history, but history about us, because again, no one is really talking about us, especially as women. You know, so the stories that you told just made me like, wow, this is awesome.
Well, and I have found that things that we sometimes take for granted, it's not necessarly common knowledge. You know, for a while I thought I'm the last one catching on to this. You know, I didn't know about people sneaking out off of farms because the owner of the land would not let them go. I said, oh, you know, I'm the last one finding out about this. But I'm finding out that very few people really know. We talk about immigrants now coming over on tire irons and hiding. Much the same thing happened to our people coming out of the South because they were the labor force. And the owners of what were plantations, but really were still plantations, did not want that free labor to go. So people had to, you know, had to sneak away. And I never learned that in school. I thought perhaps everyone else did. I went through a white school system. I thought other people, learned it, but I'm finding out that now that they didn't.
Right.
And certainly Isabel Wilkerson's novel, The Warmth of Other Suns, tells the story
Right.
very well
Okay.
of those individuals, and there are just hundreds of thousands
Right.
of individual stories out there that need to be told.
Yeah.
So the book is coming.
That's going to be marvelous.
Yeah.
That's going to be marvelous.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think, that's why I brought you on the show, because I really want everyone to hear your story, and for, people to call you up, have you speaking at different speaking engagements, going to high schools, maybe colleges, so that people can get this information.
Well, another part of the story that's unknown, we live in New Jersey, which is a northern state, and lots of people do not realize that there did indeed exist segregation, well, first slavery,
Right.
and segregation in this state.
Oh, yes.
And slavery did not end until the 13th Amendment, after the Civil War.
Right.
And there was Jim Crow, strict Jim Crow in the South, and even though it may not have been legislated Jim Crow in the North, there was strict segregation.
Right.
De facto segregation,
Yes.
and many people do not know that. The women that I spoke to who came up from the South, yes, they could go to the movies
Right.
now, but only certain
Right.
movie houses.
Yes.
They were not allowed in others. Yes, they could dine in certain restaurants,
Right.
but not every restaurant
Exactly.
was
Wow.
open to them. So that story of segregation and discrimination in New Jersey is another one that needs to be told.
Right.
Our schools were segregated. The town that my husband is from, in Burlington, New Jersey, had a segregated school system until the 1950s.
Wow. That's,
So those are stories
That's recent.
Yeah, that's recent.
That's
That's
very
very
recent,
recent.
yes.
It's very
Yeah,
recent.
my brother used to live in Burlington.
Yeah, it's very recent. So there's also that part of our history that we do not know about.
Right.
Also, the small towns that were all black towns that were founded by runaway slaves that are in New Jersey. There's one Timbuktu in Burlington County. There's Whitesville that Stedman Graham is from.
Right. Okay.
In Cape May County.
Right.
There's, everyone knows about Lawnside in Camden County,
Right.
but there are many of them
Right.
around, and it's a part of that part of our history
Yes.
is still not taught in
Right.
most schools.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel that part of it is my
Yes,
job to get that
yes,
news out
yes.
there,
No,
that story out
What
there.
can we do to, force the hand to get this in the schools? I know that's like a whole big project by itself, but I think
Well, history in general.
Yeah.
I fear for the plight of history in general in schools as we teach more and more to the test.
Right. Yes, that's very true. Very
History
true.
gets sidetracked a
Yes.
good deal. And when I was at the Historical Society, we brought classes in, and teachers often talked about the struggle they
right.
had to include just American history in
Right.
general into their curriculum. And I think parents and other educators have to fight
Yes.
for that. Not everything should be a test.
Right. No, I agree.
What's happening to the humanities in general is we better watch ourselves as a
yes.
civilization.
Yeah, I agree 100%. They're losing so much.
Yeah.
when they take away
Geography, history, literature,
Right.
those are things that that we're losing,
Right.
but history in particular. And our state, I don't feel is shown adequate pride in its
Right,
history.
right.
This is, well, we're in Princeton,
Yes.
right?
There's a lot of history.
A lot of
here as
history
well.
right here,
That's what I'm
right
saying,
here
there's a lot
in
of history
Princeton.
right here.
Trenton, the Battle of
Yes.
Trenton
Oh,
turned the
yes.
tide of the war.
Yes.
The Battle of Monmouth, the Battle of Princeton,
Yes.
all right here. And I know that when I go into Massachusetts or Maryland
Right.
or even Pennsylvania, you see a big sign
Right.
that says, welcome, and then right away you see signs applauding the history of the state. We don't have that here.
Right.
And certainly what's happening to state funding for organizations that deal with our preservation and with our history do not seem to be a priority.
Yes.
And until that turns around, until that happens, I fear for the number of people who are going to college who major
Right. Yes.
in history, who's going to do the research, who's going to write the books that tell this kind of history.
Right.
So it's, you know, I'd like to rally around and crusade for everything. 'Cause
Right,
it's-
but I mean, you're one person, so you have to kind of,
Well, there are a number of us out
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
You know, we're
yeah, just I guess finding all the writers that's their interest, and then just rallying together and
yeah, because who are we
real
if we don't
action.
know our history?
Right, exactly. Because we need to know that history
Our,
so
you
that
know,
we
those
can go
roots
ahead
are
and-
important.
Right, it is very
You know, and
important.
Alex Haley taught us that
Oh,
years
yeah.
ago, that those roots are
Right,
important.
it
You know,
is.
we need to know where we're from,
Right.
and in order to understand where we're going
Exactly.
and how we are where we are
Right.
today.
How to improve.
How
you
to
know,
improve, how to not make the mistakes of the
same
past.
mistakes
You know,
over and over.
learn what those mistakes were and figure out ways not to repeat them.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there are a number of us out there
Wow.
trying.
Yes, that's wonderful. And
good.
you said, like you said, you do this almost full time now with the research.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do. Giving a number of talks surrounding Memorial Day,
Right.
on the history of Memorial Day and what it means in African American
Right,
communities, you know, because we have a very distinguished history in our armed forces from the French and Indian War forward.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
We were always soldiers, and our women were always helping the cause
Right.
on the sidelines. There are two cemeteries in the state, colored cemeteries of people
Okay.
who fought in the Civil War.
Wow.
That I'll be speaking at, talking
Oh,
about
wow.
their history and fighting for
Okay.
the Civil War.
Wow. When are you going to be doing that?
Actually, next Saturday is one,
Okay.
and then the following Saturday is
Okay.
the other.
And where's that going to be? Is it people?
Timbuktu
Okay.
on next Saturday, and in the Sourland Mountains, there's a
Okay.
cemetery there. So
Okay,
I'll be talking
wow.
there in Hopewell.
All right. Now, is it something that people can go online and
If you go and
register?
look at my website, which is
Okay.
1804consultants.net, you will be able to see information about both of those speaking engagements. And
Wonderful.
also, the talk that where we met
Yes.
at NJPAC is on that
Right.
same website.
Right.
And if you scroll down, if you go to upcoming events and you scroll down to something that says "Open the door, I'll get it
Okay.
myself," you'll see that
Right.
talk
Okay, nice.
and everything
Nice.
listed
Yeah,
there.
that was an excellent talk.
Oh,
It was-
thank you.
I was like so intrigued.
Thank
So
you.
intrigued.
Thank you.
All the history, you know.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
wonderful.
And I do try and make sure that my information is accurate,
Right.
but also interesting.
Right.
Many of us did not have
Well,
a good time in
I'll
history
tell
while
you,
you were in school.
I'll be the first to
right?
say, honestly, I did not like history in school. And when I was in college, I said, okay, let me take it one day. It was about 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
Mistake.
Yeah.
The teacher, monotone the whole 4 hours. I was like, that's pulling my hair out. So if you don't get a teacher that's interesting,
That's
that
true.
makes it worse.
It's true. But hopefully you know from NJPAC that it can be interesting.
Yes, it definitely can
I
be.
think many people, well, in the past, we approach history in the context of great white men.
Right.
We now have what we call public history,
Yes.
where we try and talk about the history of the common person, because you know we all have a part
Of course.
in how the
yes.
world turns.
Yes.
And that's what I try and do,
Right.
to talk about what everyday men and women
yes.
did. I work with the Elizabeth Historical Society, and we are in Elizabeth are taking neighborhood by neighborhood,
Oh, wow.
interviewing people and doing the history of every neighborhood.
Wow.
What was there
Right,
100 years
right.
ago? What's there
Wow, that's
now, and
nice.
how it got to
Okay.
where it was? By talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you lived in this neighborhood for 30 years, who were your neighbors
Right,
then?
exactly.
What nationality were
Yes.
they? You know, what did you
Is
do
that
for
the best
fun?
research?
Right? That's research,
Yeah.
and that's history.
Yes, it is.
That's history.
Yeah.
It's not just George Washington. We don't want to negate his importance. It was
Right.
very
Of
important.
course.
But we also had Cujo,
Yes.
who was a Newark slave who fought for his master and distinguished himself in the Battle of Monmouth.
Right.
And I actually have a friend who just wrote a book on Cujo,
Okay.
who has traced his lineage
Wow.
from the Revolutionary War to modern day Youngstown, Ohio.
Wow.
He's actually traced his lineage on both sides of the Atlantic in Ghana as
Wow.
well.
Wow.
That's history.
Nice. Yes.
But
yes.
Cujo was a slave, who received his freedom for
Right.
his bravery
Yes.
in battle, and became actually a fairly important businessman
Yeah. Wonderful.
after
Yeah.
his freedom. that's history, and
Yes,
that
it
probably
is.
might have been a little bit more important to you than Benjamin Franklin, right?
Yeah,
Would that have captured
yes,
your attention?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Because you know
so-
what? We need to hear about just ordinary people, not someone that's famous and that's. I think that you can really get into people
And
more
it's not just
enjoying
it's
it.
not just numbers and dates.
Right.
It's the story of people,
Regular
what they
people.
did, what they ate, how they reacted, what they
Right.
played, what music they listened to.
Yes.
That's all history, and it's all part of what makes us who we are
Yes.
today.
It does. It really does.
All, I opened up a lecture once and said, the first food that I learned how to cook was rice. Now, who can tell me where my mother was from? And a few of them
You like so?
a few of them knew that it had to be the southeastern United States,
Right.
which it was. But because we're Geechee, and Geechees eat rice every day.
Yes. We're from Jamaica. My father loves rice.
Loves rice. So,
every day he wants rice.
Okay, so you can start by just small things in your
things.
family, and I always encourage young people, especially because I to ask questions.
Yes.
Well, why do we eat macaroni and cheese on Palm Sunday, if that's
Right.
what your family
Right.
does, or
Yes.
why is it turkey for Thanksgiving?
Right. Yeah,
Or
that's true. I think
and
it's a good way to engage them into learning their history. That
Exactly.
sounds like a lot of fun.
For holidays, I sent out Easter cards.
Right.
Well, I sent my Easter card, was a homemade card, and it included the history of Marian Anderson singing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on Easter Sunday.
Wow.
And I told that story there. So I
Nice.
try, you asked how
Yes,
I try
yes.
and do this. That's,
Yeah.
a simple
Yes,
thing
yeah,
that,
that's
she
interesting.
wanted to speak in the Daughters of the American Revolution. They wouldn't let her.
Right.
Eleanor Roosevelt intervened,
Right.
and, here we have this. So
Nice.
we need to know
Nice.
this information.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's awesome. Tremendous.
good.
So, I mean, like I said, I want you to get sponsors or people that are really interested. So, just, again, tell us the website and how they can get in touch with you.
My name is Linda Caldwell Epps. You can Google the name. But the website is 1804consultants.net. 1804 is significant because it's the date that the manumission of slavery started in the state of New Jersey. It didn't end until the 13th Amendment, but
Right.
it started in 1804. So
Wow.
1804consultants.net.
Wow.
You can get in touch with me through that website.
Right. Okay, wonderful. So if anybody wants to have Linda come and speak, you know where to find her.
Yes.
So Linda, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me,
It was really
Sharon.
wonderful having you here.
Yeah, it's a lovely day and a lovely
Yes, it
drive
is.
down here.
It is.
And wonderful meeting and
Yes,
speaking with
yes,
you again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Until next time, bye-bye.